just quickly to note, there are 4 different types of live online sessions. I'm not even talking about the asynchronous, the self-paced e-learning. And this is probably the only thing you don't have in your handout, but I'll make this available to you. I'll pop it on the website where the link is. There are 4 different types of online sessions. We meet online. How many of you go to way too many online meetings? Many of us do. But a meeting's not the same thing as training. It's a different purpose, different outcomes, different set of expectations. We do webcasts. Lauren, right before the session, was saying, hey, I attended one of your webcasts, Cindy, where there were probably 3,000 people listening to a talking head presenter. Great way to disseminate information, but a webcast is not the same thing as training. Even something like this, what we're doing right now at a conference, in a session, I wouldn't call this a training session because we're not going to open up our laptops and get hands-on practice and do knowledge checks and skill practice and feedback, which I might do in a virtual training class. And so our virtual training classes, as the gentleman pointed out, virtual training just happens to be training that takes place online. And everything we know to be true about what makes that successful makes it successful in the online environment. You also, and this is actually the chart that I'll share with you, so please don't feel like you need to write it down. Things like what platform do you use make a factor in. So how many of you, I mentioned WebEx before, how many of you use WebEx? A couple WebEx users in here? Great product. Do you use WebEx Meeting Center or do you use WebEx Training Center? They're 2 different products with 2 different features, with 2 different functionalities. How about GoTo? Any GoTo? Okay, do you use GoTo Meeting, GoTo Webcast, or GoTo Training? Or GoTo Webinar, right? There's 4 different products for 4 different types of sessions. Adobe Connect, any Adobe Connect users? Adobe Connect is probably the one that's the most similar across all the products, but there's 3 different Adobe Connect products. Which one are you using? So things like those product choices make a difference. So the solution, and this is what you have in your handout. So if you'll notice in that middle section on page number 1, the solutions, solution number 1 is get everyone in the organization on the same page. What do you mean by virtual training? What are you going to call it? What are you going to tell your learners about it? Should they be together in a conference room, huddled around a computer, or should they be by themselves? Both of them are fine, but set those expectations ahead of time. Are you going to invite 300 people to a session because you have information to share, or is this going to be hands-on, lab work? Everyone's getting practice and feedback from a skilled facilitator. Name it, say it, define it. Get on the page about it. Some of the clients I work with will put together, and this is my recommendation, this is what we believe virtual training is. This is what the learners are doing. This is what the designs are like. This is what the facilitator does. These are everyone's roles. And they just take the time to scope out a definition. And it doesn't have to be anyone else's definition. It can be your definition. Someone mentioned, hey, I want to know the textbook answer of virtual training. There's not one. There's not one. I typically define it as a very interactive learning experience with learning objectives, with individuals who are connected individually by themselves. They're geographically dispersed, one person, one computer, so they can do the hands-on, and that there's a skilled facilitator leading it. That's my definition. And so anytime I design to that standard. Anytime I communicate with participants, I communicate to that standard. So define it, describe it, select the correct platform. That's what that one means. We already talked about it, the fact that there's different platforms that, or products. This is the example of GoTo Training, GoTo Meeting, GoTo Webinar. By the way, what other platforms do you use? Any others that I didn't mention? I know we've got Saba, another popular one. What else? Skype. What a great meeting platform. Fantastic meeting platform. Fantastic meeting platform. It's not designed for training. Now, does that mean, and think about it, do you go to an Italian restaurant and order steak? Maybe you could, and it would be it would fill your desire. You would not go away hungry, but it would be the best steak you've ever eaten? No. And likewise, would you go to a steak restaurant and order Italian? Probably not. Probably not, because it's just not what it's known for. So Skype is really great at meetings. Skype is not necessarily set up for training. So selecting the platform, selecting the correct platform. Say that 5 times fast. Any other platforms that you use? Anything we haven't mentioned? Yes.
The only reason I mention this is because we're built our own.
Uh-huh.
And it does actually all those forms.
Oh, good, good, good. So what the gentleman said is you're using a system that you've built internally. And I will say, just to point out, there's great platforms out there. And a common question is, which one should I use? And it's kind of like telling you what kind of car you should drive. Everyone has their own opinion about it. They all do similar things, but with their own things, their own unique nuances to it. Very often, if you have a training platform, it will do meetings, it will do webinars, it will do the others. It's often the opposite that doesn't happen. A meeting platform is not necessarily designed for training, if that makes sense. So think about that. Get to know your IT department. If you're in the process of selecting, partner with them. It does take a partnership. Well, thinking still about the solutions, those mismatched expectations. So I mentioned getting everybody on the same page. And this is something that I will do before any virtual program that I deliver, is to personally send out a message to my participants, to let them know this is going to be an interactive session. And this is an example of an email that I might send. And one of the very first things I send, in highlight, in bold, expect to come and participate. And I might say it in different ways depending on the organization I'm working with. This is, yes, in addition to any automated messages that might come out from the LMS. And you might notice, if you're able to see the tiny text, I will also always ask for a response. And the response might be a 1-word answer, a 2-word answer, but what does that tell me? Who read the email? And then I'll use those answers at some point during the virtual session. Hey, everybody, thanks for responding. Because if they don't respond, this happens to be a message that was sent the day of. Sometimes I'll do it the day before or 2 days before. And those who don't respond, I'll send the message again. Hey, I just wanted to make sure you got the connection details. And by the way, thanks to everyone who's responded to the important questions so far. I'm looking forward to hearing from the rest of you, or, something like that. Not to be obnoxious, but to set messages. How many of you send messages in advance? Awesome. And do you tell people more than just what's in the standard meeting invite? Some of you are saying no. Okay, so this is your number 1 action item that you can do, and you can set it up so it's not terribly time-consuming, especially with a lot of the automations. And then when you join a session, and we'll talk in a couple of minutes more about what should happen at the start of a session, but one of those things to do is to set ground rules. How many of you in your in-person classes, when you're facilitating, design in some sort of time for an agreement or a partnership or ground rules? They're called a lot of different things. We should do them in the virtual classroom as well. Whether that's through a lobby loop at the beginning, whether that's through voting, lots of different interactive ways. Adult learning is adult learning. We want our learners to be able to learn, and we want to make that environment set for them to do it. And if they think they're coming to a conference call, we're not going to have a very successful session.